Welcome to Bitcoin. All roads lead to BTC.
It's called a pig butchering scam, and it might sound like a gruesome name, but that's because the amount of money victims are losing is painful.
The scammers have a terrible term for what Wendy went through. They call it pig butchering.
The New Mexico Securities Division calls them pig butchering scams. I know, but listen, don't worry. There are no pigs or any other animals involved.
Welcome to Bitcoin. Today, we're talking about pig butchering. Not so much sausage and bacon, more along the lines of the popular crypto scheme that's causing a lot of people to lose millions of dollars. So, essentially what these scammers are doing, they're creating fake accounts, sending messages, building relationships and trust over time, and trying to convince you to use the same method they use to grow their funds. And more often than not, if it sounds too good to be true, it's usually a trap or some sort of a catch. And this is what just occurred. It's probably the biggest seizure from the Department of Justice, and it's totally related to pig butchering. So as I mentioned, it's a long game fraud scammers use. They build trust. Sometimes it's romantic, sometimes it's a friendship, but they build this relationship before trying to convince victims to invest in fake crypto schemes and put in all their money. The term butchering is actually a phrase for the victims. That's the term these scammers use when they drain the funds, all the funds of their victims. So it's often linked with fraud, factories, or scam compounds, and sometimes the workers are even coerced into this. Let's talk about what the DOJ did today. So they indicted Shen Zi. This was the ringleader of this pig butchering scheme. It's also known as Vincent. This is the head of the Prince Group, and they accused him of running a forced labor scam compound in Cambodia for crypto fraud. So they filed a civil forfeiture to claim over 127,000 Bitcoin, approximately 15 billion worth. And it was it was in unhosted wallets tied to the fraud. So they made the largest seizure in DOJ history, and they also imposed some sanctions on dozens of shell companies and other entities. Additionally, FIN, SEN, designated as the Hoan Group, a financial communications conglomerate tied to the Prince Group as a primary money laundering concern, they're also getting involved into this. What does this mean for Bitcoin? Well, it is a significant win for the United States Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. While the US isn't directly buying Bitcoin, President Trump made the commitment to hold all future forfeitures of Bitcoin in a Bitcoin strategic reserve. Prior to, they were seizing Bitcoin, and it was often being sold on the exchange and it wasn't being held. Moving forward, the seizure of Bitcoin is going to stay in the Bitcoin strategic reserve, further building up the United States holding. With this allocation, it brings the US's Bitcoin holding over 300,000, which is quite significant. I could be wrong, but it could be the second largest holding compared to Satoshi Nakamoto. So big win for the US's Bitcoin strategic reserve?
I mean, the reason why we need a Bitcoin reserve is that the federal government already owns some. In fact, it obtained around 400,000 Bitcoin over the past decade through criminal and civil forfeitures and seizures. And so the government has to have a strategy for how it deals with this. In the past, the strategy has been simply to sell it, in an ad hoc way, almost willy-nilly. And that cost American taxpayers something like $17 billion in lost value. So we want to have a long-term strategy to maximize the value of these holdings. And we've decided that Bitcoin is scarce, it's valuable, and that it's strategic for the United States to hold on to this as a long-term reserve asset. So that's the plan with the 200,000 Bitcoin that we believe are in the possession of the federal government. And I say we believe because no one really knows for sure because we never had a proper audit. So that's one of the first things that this executive order provides, that we're going to do a full government-wide audit to find out what digital assets we actually have so they can be safeguarded and moved into a strategy that maximizes their long-term value.
For Bitcoin in general, it's a testament that anything that is not Bitcoin has a higher probability of being some sort of scam. As my shirt suggests, believe in Bitcoin.
It appears that inflation certainly is running above our target and appears to be continuing to increase quite gradually, but increase. It's still on the way up. So there's a risk there that would lend to greater persistence. But now the labor market has demonstrated pretty significant downside risks as payroll jobs have declined, and both the supply and demand for labor has declined quite sharply. So those two states of affairs for our two goal variables, call for different monetary policy responses. So as they come more into balance, I think the idea has been that policy should move from being tight to some degree to being more neutral as those two things balance out. But it is clear though that if we move too quickly, then we may leave the inflation job unfinished and have to come back later and finish it. If we move too slowly, there may be unnecessary losses, painful losses in the employment market. So we're in the difficult situation of balancing those two things. I think for the last few months, we've been able to maintain a restrictive stance because the labor market was still pretty solid. I think that the data we got right after the July meeting showed that, which adjusted back all the way through May, showed that the labor market has actually softened pretty considerably and puts us in a situation where the two risks are closer to being in balance.
Fed Chairman Jerome Powell spoke in Philadelphia today with some remarks that could slightly boost Bitcoin. He took a dovish tone. He said the job market is slowing, hinted that the Fed rate's balance sheet reduction may end soon, and left the door open for rate cuts later in 2025. So there's more liquidity. Lower rates and less tightening usually means more money in the markets, which supports risk assets like Bitcoin. If it were hawkish, any talk of delaying rate cuts or warnings about inflation could send Bitcoin to a lower price point, as investors would be moving their funds to more safer assets. Overall, Powell's tone leaned cautiously dovish, suggesting short-term positive basis for Bitcoin unless inflation fears tend to resurface. So that's good news.
Our Bitcoin IBIT is now over $100 billion.
I know, from nothing not that long ago.
And 2 years ago, zero.
Yeah,
so,
I know. Well, you weren't always a huge proponent of crypto, as we know. Love it now.
But I grow and learn.
BlackRock's IBIT is the fastest ETF in financial history. It's grossed over $100 billion and is becoming a testimony of what Bitcoin can do when partnered with Wall Street. It's laying the groundwork for other financial institutions to get on board.
You see the price of Bitcoin heading?
Higher.
How much higher?
A lot higher. My general framework from the highest level is human beings collectively, we own about $900 trillion worth of stuff. That's equities, the things behind us, real estate, precious metals, fine art, all of the things that we own. Half of that we're using as a savings account. We're owning the portfolio of companies or the art or the house to actually try and persist wealth into the future. I think Bitcoin's going after that market. It's going after a market of $400 to $500 trillion worth, and right now it's $2.5 trillion. So I think in purchasing power terms, Bitcoin can go up 100 to 200 times more from here.
All right.
Jack Muller speculates that Bitcoin can grow 100 to 200%, and that's placing the price point at well over 24 million. His hypothesis is that Bitcoin will capture the 900 trillion market cap of the world's wealth. And he laid it out particularly expressing that most, as Michael Saylor put it, analog assets, they have their drawbacks, and a lot of capital is going to transmute into digital wealth, which is Bitcoin. Gold, you need a lot of security. You can't transport it across the world at the speed of light. Art can get burned. You also need security as well, and then also the authenticity of art. Long story short, let's even talk about real estate. Real estate, you have to pay taxes on this, you have to maintain it, it could get knocked down from a hurricane, and you gotta insure it as well. There's countless drawbacks to conventional analog wealth. Bitcoin solves those solutions, the world is waking up to that, and they're gonna start pouring money into Bitcoin as a store of value. When this happens, that's when we can see a 200x price point, as Jack explained.